I'm Mark Boris and this is Straight Talk.
Is there an existential threat to rugby union? Will it last?
The fear is that we don't get it right. That's the scary thing about this.
Stephen Hoiles, welcome to Straight Talk, mate. I want to talk to you about the state of rugby union, and you're a coach. You were also a player at the highest level, so you can actually speak expertly on this.
It isn't going great here in Australia at the professional level. Other levels of the game are great. All we see on TV is really Super Rugby and Test footy, and Super Rugby is the big problem.
What would you do in terms of Super Rugby?
Yeah, there's a big part of me that thinks it's probably run its race, to be honest. Put it in this terms. There's 5 teams at the moment with a $5 million salary cap each versus 16 NRL teams with $13 million salary cap. How are you going to compete on that front? That is probably half the reason why a lot of league fans hate rugby at the moment, because our former chairman was out there disrespecting the intelligence of another code. Like, I just thought that was poor taste, and rugby's never been about that.
Stephen Hoiles, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Well, I haven't seen you since, you'll be early 40s now. I haven't seen you since you're about probably 15 or 16, around that territory when you were playing for East Randwick back in the day. The East Randwick rep side,
yep.
But you're a Randwick boy back in those days.
We merged our rep teams. That weekend was on recently, and my son's at that age at the moment, actually.
Yeah. Your son?
Oh, one of my kids is
really
13. He didn't make that Randwick side, unfortunately, but he's going through the same age when I last met you.
Yeah, and I can't remember, but you're a back rower. I think you're a back rower. Yeah. And you got you're much taller than you were then.
Yeah,
you did a late spurt or something.
Yeah, when I was at school, 13 to 16, year 7 to year 12, I wasn't allowed to play in the forward, I had to play in the backs at Waverley. I was too short. So I got those years of being halfback and 5'8", which then helped me later in life when I had my growth spurt. So
Trent Langlands, was he your territory or
Chang was
early?
A few years older.
Yeah,
Chang was a couple of years older, and I was in the surf club and training with Changa, so I know him well. Yeah.
So, and you come from rugby union territory. I mean, your dad played footy.
Yeah.
Have you always been Randwick heritage?
Yeah. So Dad's a Maroubra boy, and I grew up at Randwick. Dad won a few first grade premierships as a centre. He finished quite early, like by the age of 26 he was finished because he was managing the airport for customs. But then as I grew up, I was a Coogee Wombat for 10 years whilst playing league on a Sunday, rugby on a Saturday. But Mum worked at the New South Wales Rugby League the whole way. I was from about the age of 5 to 15. And that was, I saw your Johnny Quayle interview, and that was sort of the era that I grew up in. I was halftime entertainment at every second grand final and got tickets to all the big games. So I'm a Tigers tragic. Don't know how. I actually do know. I got given a number 1 jersey when I was a kid, Australian number 1. That was Gary Jack.
Oh, Gary
so
Jack,
all my mates are
player.
South and East, being a Waverley boy, but I was a Tigers tragic, and I did league and union all the way through. And then when I got to 15, I had to sort of pick one, and I think I just suited rugby. The game flowed a little bit more.
In those days?
Yeah, absolutely. It flowed a lot to the point where I could read the game a little bit better in rugby, and that was probably what helped me. I didn't really have a position in league. I was a hooker, halfback, lock, whereas in rugby I got to be a flanker, and that was that hybrid position. And back then, flankers just used to chase the ball. It's different now because of the way the modern day is. But yeah, did both and still enjoy both.
So I wouldn't mind going back to that time, just in terms of style. So, and just to talk about the way the world's changed, and it's worth explaining. A lot of the rugby league kids, if they went to private schools, particularly around the east suburbs areas and Lower North Shore, they played league on Sundays and union on Saturdays, sometimes Friday night, basically. And the schools, and they played rugby for their school on the Saturday. You went and played, like you were at Waverley, you went and played in the CAS and other kids playing the GPS, etc., all the different competitions. And then you would probably played club rugby as well, and that could have been on a Friday night or during the week. So ordinarily you'd be training nearly every night of the week.
Yeah.
From one or the other. You'd be playing club rugby, which was a short season, but then there was rep rugby, and then you were playing school rugby, which is sort of a short season. It was like 6 games or something like that. And then you're playing rugby league on the Sunday. Even then, there was a fair bit of tension between what schools expected from you in terms of playing rugby and what rugby league expected from you in terms of playing rugby league in particular, and in particular training. And there's a lot of pressure on the kids. Give up rugby league.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do remember it. And essentially, like when I was in year 12, I played in the first in year 12. I couldn't play league in the holidays. I had to sneak off a couple of games to the Wombats. I didn't want Waverley to find out because there was a strict rule you couldn't.
Why? What do you think that's about?
I think it's a control thing, to be honest. It's gone back that, to be fair. Now I now know that schools are encouraging kids to go and play club rugby and league.
Yeah, that's because they teach them how to tackle.
That's right. Like, there are benefits of doing both. Absolutely. So, and you see the kids that are around 14, 15, and I see now my son's 13. I see the kids that are better in almost every aspect of the game. They're the ones that are playing league, union. Some of them are even playing AFL. I think being restricted to who you play for and what you do outside of your school hours, I don't think that's a healthy thing for a kid.
So right now, you're a coach, and you're coaching Randwick, and I just wanted to lay that down as a foundation straight up, because I want to talk to you about rugby union and the state of rugby union, and being a coach, you can actually, speak expertly on this, as not just because you were also a player, rugby union player at the highest level, but like in terms of coaching, I want to talk to you about coaching and where the rugby union game's gone. I can say to you honestly, back in the early 80s, I was an avid fan of rugby union as well as rugby league. In fact, I sponsored the East Rugby Union side for a number of years, that was my very first sponsorship I ever did. But then it changed. Rugby union's changed for me, and I to be honest, I have very little interest in watching game of rugby union today. Not just because I'm a rugby league fan.
No, but
the game's changed.
Yeah, it has.
And I want to go back and ask you if you could go back to your rugby union days when you were a kid, playing, for Randwick, etc., and or playing for Waverley, whoever it was. But could you explain to me what the game was like then? And what I mean by that is in terms of flow, lack of interruptions, less rules, a lot of ball playing, not just about kicking, etc. Just give us a picture of what it was like when you fell in love with it.
Yeah, I grew up watching the great teams of Randwick in the 80s and 90s, so that's where I learnt the game.
As in the Ella Brothers? Exactly,
like the Poitevins, the Campeses, the Knoxes, the names just go on and on, honestly. So the game had a way of trying to keep the ball off the ground. It was about continuity of play.
What does that mean? Keep the ball off the ground.
You'd be able to run and stand and set up a maul and keep playing. Now you see the ball go to ground. Now I reckon the biggest difference is you run at faces now. You used to run at spaces, and there's a big difference. Like tackling's evolved. So we were taught as kids, as a back rower, chase the ball, just be 2 or 3 metres behind the ball the whole time. Now, because defence has improved and people are better at stealing the football, as in poach, think of George Smith, Phil Ward, David Pocock in their peak. If someone was isolated at any stage of the game, a good on-baller would get over the ball and steal it or get a penalty. So that would be most likely a stoppage. So players evolve to become really good over the ball. And I have this argument with my dad constantly about why the game has so much kick in. If you don't kick the ball, so if you run the ball at the wrong part of the field, or you don't have enough support play around you, just try and put it in a league term. If you run and you're not near your dummy half and you get tackled not near your dummy half, you'll lose the ball. So you've got to be...
Because they have better skills at taking away from you.
Defensively, people are just better. It used to be like George Smith changed the game because he was number 7. He was an on-baller. And then all of a sudden people were like, well, it doesn't have to be just George Smith. Hookers become on-ballers.
What's on-baller mean?
Like getting over the ball, stealing the football, getting that sort of... they call it a jackal or a pilfer position. And it was typically 20 years ago, it was probably one player in the field was good on the ball. Now there's 10 to 12. If you're not good on the ball and you can't slide up the ruck or you can't steal the ball,
you don't make it into
you're not
grade.
getting picked.
Yeah.
So the game has evolved massively on that front, but there's also the fear of a player losing the ball. If in doubt, players will now run to someone and go and reset and try and get a new phase, another arc. Whereas
so they go to ground.
They go to ground and that's right. They place it back.
Yeah.
And as I said, as a back rower, I just used to chase the ball. And now a lot of back rowers are coached to be, you go from this line out and you stay on this side of the field. We want one back row on this side, we want one on the other, and we want one in the middle. So you kind of spread out a little bit more they call it shape and pods.
Yep.
And I'm probably talking another language too, but
it's
just become way more structured. And I think the scrums are really slow part of the game at the moment. I think back to the years you watched it was, and you only have to go and watch footage. Whistle's blown, 8 forwards get up and they just go and pack a scrum. And it's almost if the contest happens once they've hit their shoulders. And that used to take 10, 20 seconds to get that set. We're taking 90 seconds to get a scrum set now, and then there's resets.
Why is that? Is it more about safety?
They made the gap really big. About my area of the gap was about 1 metre, and it was like two cars crashing into each other for 1 metre. There was a lot of damage getting done to players, a lot of sort of retirement from spine injuries, and not necessarily like disability injuries, but just more wear and tear. So they tried to sort of shorten the gap, but it still takes a long time. It's a bit too technical to make it too quick.
Shorten the gap in terms of before they engage.
Yeah. So they want the gap to be like, it used to be like that, then they've brought it to there, and you go back to the 80s, the gap was sort of like that far away.
So that's interesting. So that's actually something that I don't know, whoever it is, the referees or whoever controls the play safety, they've actually said to the referees, you don't let them engage or get ready to engage until they're close enough that they're not going to cause effectively too much damage to each other. Because when you think about it, there's probably, I don't know, a ton of weight
it's
close enough.
Yeah, honestly, most packs are just under a ton.
Just under a ton,
International packs about 900 kilos.
And they sort of train to have as much force as possible.
Yeah.
So
things can go wrong so quickly.
Yeah. So that's a player's safety.
It's player safety, but they haven't solved it, to be fair. Like, you've got to look back at what has worked in the past, and I'm the same as you. I'll turn on a game and I'll get really frustrated. You can kill a game of rugby and fight. You can lose 4 to 5 minutes at the end of a game. You think about it, your side's just gone up by 3 points. The opposition in rugby league, that's probably 2 sets each, 5 minutes. You know you're going to have a crack. In rugby, you can manipulate the laws or how they're interpreted to kill a clock, and that's a disappointing aspect of the game.
So when you were playing, what is it about? I still remember the term back in the 80s, running rugby.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I found that attractive. Like the Campeses and all. The wingers that get the ball actually get the ball. Yeah. They weren't running to chase a kick or something, but that was actually getting out to the wingers.
There was more space for them, because if you go back again, look at some footage, one ruck would be, at the moment, it's about how you can win your ruck with the least amount of numbers as possible. So you want the ball carrier +2. And you go back and look at footage in the 90s, it's ball carrier +4. 1, 2, 3, maybe a couple more forwards, just get out of the way. They get out of the way. So there was more space out wider. But now, those people that just come through to get out of the way, they're not there. They're out in the same place that the centres or the wingers want to be.
So there's lots of defensive coverage.
Yeah. Like, people say one of the things that could solve rugby's problems, you could drop it to 13
I was going to say,
you honestly could.
Yeah.
But people that, for whatever reason, that's too much like rugby league, we can't consider it, or you widen the fields. Now, it's probably a lot difficult to widen fields all around the world.
Yeah.
Probably easier to take, but it's never been considered, because I think they would feel it's jumping into rugby league territory.
Yeah, because it's a big game with a lot of followers globally. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And but it's losing followers, and it's losing therefore losing attractiveness in terms of revenue and sponsorships, and therefore
here in particular, here in New Zealand,
Australia,
globally it's going great. Like, World Cups are fantastic. Women's, like, there's so many aspects of the game that is really healthy. But you read Australian media, in News Corp, Fox Sports used to have the game. Since they've lost it, then they're not
it's
a positive.
It's on stand now or something.
That's on stand now, but it's not a positive media. It's not positive in the media at the moment, rugby. But it isn't going great here in Australia at the professional level. Other levels of the game are great, but what we see on TV, all we see on TV is really Super Rugby and Test footy. And Super Rugby is probably the big one that's hurting us. Test footy will always be healthy, but the Wallabies haven't been successful. So we're sort of we're reacting to their performance of late. That's why the game is viewed as if it's not that healthy, because the Wallabies aren't going well. Super Rugby is the big problem.
But why would you say the Wallabies aren't going well? Let's just. Is it because of 10 years ago the kids who are growing up and who have now become Wallabies, they have don't have the right skills, or what's the case?
No, like, the international market's become very competitive. Like, during my playing era, you could have got to Europe at the start of your career. A couple of people were going to France, and a few people were starting to enter the Japanese league. Now, like, those markets are huge. USA's got competitions. So that's not, the global market is one of the reasons. I would say, and again, this is really polarising, because we've just cut a team, as in Melbourne Rebels. We've just not had...
Well, they went broke.
They went broke, and they've been broke. They've never been a financially successful model. So the game has been pouring money into... And it's not just hurt Melbourne, it's hurt New South Wales, it's hurt the Brumbies, it's hurt everyone, and it's hurt Perth. Like, Perth's got Twiggy Forrest there, who's obviously a very successful backer of the side. So we've never had the talent to sustain 5 elite Super Rugby teams And when I think we brought in Melbourne because it was private money, it was Harold Mitchell. And I think the game viewed
passed
as,
away
he passed away a couple of years ago, but he only held the licence for a couple of years.
Right.
Once he realised it wasn't working, he handed the licence back over to Rugby Australia. And they've been propping up the Rebels for a long, long time. I just don't think we've had the talent at that elite level for 5 teams. When you think, put it in these terms, there's 5 teams at the moment with a $5 million salary cap each versus 16 NRL teams with $13 million salary cap. How are you going to compete on that front?
Well, why isn't they don't have the talent? Because is it because the pool of talent where the kids grow up in playing footy is sort of still restricted to private schools?
Well, I think the talent, like you've got kids at the schools that I went to Waverley, the CAS, the GPS. There's probably a dozen AFL players now that have come from CAS and GPS as non-AFL players. They've gone and got the best locks, the kids that are going to be 190, 195 centimetres. AFL teams have gone out. They've just got great recruitment tools. So all these young players, it's hard to get good tall players. A lot of them playing AFL. We've got enough good players for a really good club competition, and I think club footy is excellent. It's healthy and it's thriving. But just at Super Rugby level, the 5 teams haven't been performing enough against the Kiwi teams, and it definitely hasn't helped the Wallaby performance. You can't argue that one. In the performance over the last 10 years, since we went from 3 teams, it was Queensland, New South Wales, and the Brumbies, and then we went to Perth, and then we rushed to Melbourne a couple of years after Perth, and that was when you noticed the player drain. It was probably easier for players to get contracts, and they weren't going through that club system and getting the 20, 30, 40 games of club footy where they're getting bashed up by a 30-year-old, where they're getting hardened by playing second grade and third grade. A lot of kids were coming out of schools and going, and because of the competition and the offers from league, it was like, I got an offer from South, I got an offer from Roosters or Western Force, so I'm going to make a big offer. I'm going to stay in rugby, and they'll get into Super Rugby probably a little bit quicker than it had happened previously.
And because they weren't hardened enough or at least experienced enough,
I think so,
to play at that level.
Yeah.
But in terms of
then they weren't playing enough games. Super Rugby's a 16-game season, and they weren't all getting sent back to play club footy. And you go from
why not?
I don't know, academies, programs, all that sort of off-season tours and all that sort of stuff, and players being relocated to different parts of the country. So, yeah, I think that's a big reason. The number of games, you mentioned before, 40-game season for a kid is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And, I reckon at professional level, you could go and do a survey. You've probably got maybe 20% of players who aren't, the Wallabies, I'll use last year as an example. I got 30 minutes out of one professional player after the Super Rugby for the Randwick season. I got one player for 30 minutes.
You can't say to them, you've got to come play.
No, they've got to want to. The game needs them to play. World Cup year is a bit of an anomaly because they're sort of wrapped up in cotton wool. They're in training camps, and I don't expect to get the Wallabies. The Wallabies are playing there, but the fringe players who are, they're following the Wallabies around, and they're used for training sessions at the Wallabies and
as opponent.
Yeah, you got a squad of 35 travelling around. It's like the Origin taking 2 sides. And then Trent Robinson not being able to get access to the reserves the day after or the day before a Wallaby game because they're flying to New Zealand next week and they've got a week off, and then we're going to South Africa and we're not sure about this. So there's just always been that issue of not letting players get back and playing enough club footy after Super Rugby.
So it's pardon me saying it sounds like a mess. To be honest with you.
No,
because
I'm not offended at that. That professional side of the game, it is.
And you would say professionals not at the club rugby level?
No, the club rugby is awesome. The perception of the modern day player, and I got a complete shock in a good way of these guys get paid nothing. They train 3 nights a week. They get their weights in beforehand. Some of them aren't getting home till midnight. They're finishing training at 8:30. They're doing their weights till 10 o'clock. They're getting up. They're going to work. They're on the tools at 6 a.m. They're the heartbeat of the game, and that's where I get to see that now. And club footy is always junior footy, women's footy, 7. So many elements of the game is thriving and going really well, but we're just not seeing enough of it because we're seeing Super Rugby and Test footy on TV.
What would you do in terms of Super Rugby?
Yeah, there's a big part of me that thinks it's probably run its race, to be honest.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Super Rugby only came out in the mid-90s because of pay TV. Prior to that, if you played for New South Wales, it was like Origin. You maybe got 3 games a year. You got a tour to New Zealand, maybe Argentina. Then we started this Super Rugby with New Zealand, Australia and South Africa. And I think the audience, I was a kid, but everyone just was so excited about, the best players in South Africa being in Sydney one week and And I just think over time it probably got a little bit stale. I don't know if club footy has always been, they've tried all these different comps in between. They've tried a couple of national club competitions, but they've never tried competitions consistently with the jerseys that we're all familiar with. And everyone in the region has you could be an East fan, you could be a Gordon fan, you could be a Brothers fan or a University of Queensland. Those jerseys and teams and supporters have been around for 100 years. But we've never given them a crack to be in a national competition. We've tried all these different national competitions, but because we didn't want to alienate or offend some teams, because you can't have every club in a national comp, we've decided to start a national comp with 8 new teams, 8 new jerseys, the Sydney Rays, New South Wales Country, which isn't New South Wales Country, and Western Sydney Rams, and all these teams that none of us have any affiliation with. So that hasn't worked. In terms of the Super Rugby, that's a really tough one, because South Africa they've gone up to the Northern Hemisphere now, and they're playing in a great competition with the Welsh. They're in a Gaelic league with the Welsh, the Irish, and the Scots, and they're now thriving, and it's helped South African rugby. I lived in America for a couple of years in 2020 and 21. I was coaching rugby over there, and I looked at what they were doing with what they do with football or NFL or gridiron, sorry. I reckon we could copy something very similar. Friday nights, we'll put it this way, I don't watch my school play. I can't. I'm coaching Randwick at the same time. So your audience is fighting against each other all the time. So I can't watch Waverley play, but in America, you can watch your high school play because they play Friday nights. So you could run a good Friday night competition and you could still go down there. And if you're an East fan, you could go and watch East the next day. And all those supporters that went and watched Scots versus Cranbrook, or they could go down and also watch East versus Gordon on a Saturday. And you could put your pro footy on a Sunday like the NFL do, plus a couple of, like a Thursday night and a Monday night. So gridiron in America is never competing against each other for bums on seats or eyeballs. And they've got multiple channels covering it. It's not just Channel 9 and Fox. It's not just Stan. They've got like five or six networks. Like one has a Thursday night game. There's no Friday night professional game of football in America. Saturday's all college. So you can watch everything as a football fan in the States. Whereas here you've got to pick something. I've got to watch Randwick. I can't watch Waverley. And then I've got to rush home to watch the Waratahs who are on at 5:30 in New Zealand, all in the space of 3 hours.
It's funny you say that, because you get a Scots Joey's game.
Yeah.
And like it's packed.
Yeah.
It's packed.
That's right.
But if East are playing Randwick at the same time, someone's got to make a decision.
That's right.
And neither one will be backed.
That's right.
Or they're going to go to one and not go to the other one.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we got an administration problem here.
Yeah,
it sounds like a decision-making problem at the top, and no one's prepared to make decisions. Is the reason they have the Super Rugby, is the reason they have that, though, is because they thought it was a product they could sell in terms of broadcasting?
I believe so. That's where the money came in from. Yeah. I think it was sort of like a Super League scenario.
Yeah.
There was going to be another competition after the 95 World Cup, and guys like Phil Kearns will speak better to this, but they were all brought into meetings. They were all about to walk and sign with another competition, and then Super Rugby was born out of pay TV, Fox Sports backing it a long, long time ago. And so it was a revenue raiser, and it helped the Wallabies because we had 3 teams, and these guys went from being amateur to professional, and it helped us win a 99 World Cup, and we were sort of the leaders in the world of rugby. And then we made the final in 2003, and then it sort of over time gradually just disappeared into where it is now.
Do you think it's the same issue in New Zealand then?
Yeah, New Zealand's a weird one. Like they're going through. They've got private equity money in New Zealand, and so I know they've had some really big challenges of late. They've had potential threats of other competitions. So that's when you know it's a concern. When you're watching these are the best players in the world. You're watching the Auckland Blues play against the ACT Brumbies in a round game, and you're getting 10,000 people there. The Brumbies haven't lost. The Brumbies have lost like 1 or 2 home games. I'm going to say no more than 4 home games in the last 3 or 4 years. And they had a home final on the weekend, and there would have been, I say, 8,000 people there. The Raiders will go there the next day, and they'll get 16 or 18,000. That used to be the exact opposite. Well,
yesterday on Monday, we had Canterbury Bankstown play. The Bulldogs played Parramatta. There's 45,000 people there at Accor, like a club game. I mean,
the Swans the other day, 42,000 people.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So rugby can get back to that.
But what is it? I mean, there's something missing.
They've got to win. And again, that goes back to the number of teams and the players that are getting spread out, and players that are getting put in these teams a little bit too early because there's now 5 teams. You've sort of doubled the number of professional contracts. Well, they have. They've gone from 3 teams to 2 plus a sevens program. So they've doubled the number of professional contracts in a 10-year period. We haven't got a high number of participants. If anything, we've been plateaued because AFL and league and soccer are, working hard to get our junior players, or they're working hard to get access. So we haven't had the talent pool to go to 5 teams. That's hurt performance. People aren't silly. They want to go and see winners, and they want to go and see a good style of footy. The Waratahs got, they didn't have a good couple of years, but they were also 3 or 4 wins away from getting back up to 25, 30,000 people. Sydney's fickle.
But do you think, okay, well then, I don't know who it was, I guess it's the AAU, but they did make an attempt, the previous administration of the AAU, not the current administration, I'm not talking about Phil Ward, but I'm talking about the previous administration of the AAU. They went to Joseph Sua'ali'i, or at least to his manager.
Yeah.
And they're paying him to join Rugby Union, which is next year, 1.6 a year. I mean, is that an attempt to sort of glamorise Rugby Union and try and bring back the supporters?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of the previous administrator. It was a media play. He's a great talent. He's a rugby boy previously.
He's a King's boy.
He's both. I was coaching the Aussie Sevens, and he came in as a 15-year-old and did a session against us, and was just like, I went to Tim Walsh, who was their coach. I said, can we take him to, I think we're playing in Dubai. He said, no, I'm not allowed. He's too young. He was 15 and he was ready to play. He was that good. I think it's been it was an ego negotiation, to be honest. And I don't think it was, I'm really happy he's coming to the game, but I'm also a bit fearful that the pressure that will be put on him, because the game can't afford that salary.
How does it work? Like if I'm in the team,
players are good like that. I think players, I don't think it's going to offend players.
No?
No. I think.
Well, what about if I come to negotiate my contract?
Well, that's what's happening. Players in that position.
He's on 1.6. He hasn't played rugby union since he was at school.
It hasn't just cost the game 1.6. It's cost the game a lot more, because players in the same position. Marky Nonganitawasi is now gone to the Roosters. Jorgensen, young kid who could have gone to the Roosters. These are same position.
But Jorgensen signed up rugby. Yeah.
But they've all gone in, and their agents have all gone in and said, right, well, he's 1.6. My player was 4.
That's my starting point.
He's now 5 or 6, So it's definitely, it won't hurt. He'll be really well accepted from a playing group in rugby. Yep. Rugby will be great like that. It'll just be the constant media scrutiny that he's already getting. It'll be that, and I just don't know if. I just hope it's an enjoyable experience for him. But he could be a superstar of the game. But at the same time, $1.6 million, and Rugby Australia, I think they operate off like a $50 or $60 million a year. They've got no money. They borrowed $80 million. So let's say they're operating off $50 million a year. You've got $1.6 million of that 50 going to one player. Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then everybody else is going to go up from there. So they're all going to say, well, that's 1.6, I'm 1.1 or I'm 1.2, or I'm currently more than what I'm more than I'm currently getting. So you pay me more.
And the scariest thing about all of these negotiations for players is if Rugby Australia don't pay it, Panasonic in Japan will pay it, Suntory, Toulouse, Toulon, Northampton.
Will they pay this sort of money?
Yeah, they'll all pay big money. Most people in Australian rugby could be getting more money elsewhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the scary thing about this. The overseas market is so much stronger.
Oh, like when you say, you just mentioned some French sides, but is that because of the conversion of the dollar, or are they just pay more money?
They're all privately owned. They've got larger salary caps. They've got bigger TV deals. There's money in the game of rugby. Yeah, just not here.
Yeah, so we just lost another one of our players to Japanese rugby. The Roosters have.
Yeah.
And
Joe Manu.
Joe Manu. And I remember Craig Wing played there for a long time. It's one of the things I found quite interesting is that when you told me that he didn't play many games.
I was going to say.
And it sort of preserved him.
100% right. Yeah,
his body was good.
The Japanese season is probably a 6-game trial.
Yeah.
8 to 12 game season, maybe a couple of game playoff. You're doing 15 to 20 games like that, or you're doing 30 games in dummy half for the Roosters
getting your head knocked off.
Tackling Jodie Hargraves 20 times a game. So you do. Yeah, a lot of guys do. They go there, and the Japanese model is actually quite good. It's businesses, it's company owned.
Yeah, it's owned by Fujitsu or whatever, Daikin or whatever.
And there's employees, and the locals are playing. They come out of college. They're good rugby players, and then they get jobs for life. So they got half the club are amateur. They work. They train in the morning, they put the suit on, they go and work for the company, Toyota or Panasonic or Canon, and then they come back in after work, and the pros join them after hours, and they train like club team does.
Did you ever think to yourself that you should have gone up to Japan too?
I had a couple of chances, but there was always that rule that if you were playing overseas, you couldn't get picked for Australia.
Right.
And I just always no, I just would never have felt comfortable. And as it turns out, I never played that many games for Australia, but I just wouldn't have felt.
But you still did?
Yeah, I did. I played it, but I wouldn't have. I just know what I was like. I wouldn't have been happy with myself if I moved over wherever and I was playing great footy and I couldn't play.
But they pay well.
They did pay well, yeah. Like the offers are always better. But no, I never played overseas. I missed a few years straight with an injury. So I sort of missed about 3.5 of straight. So that might have been the time when I did go overseas. But young family, I was sort of always, I don't know, I was always happy playing here.
So but when I look at rugby league players who go off to play rugby union, what is Sonny Bill Williams is probably one of the greatest examples, but what is the attraction, apart from the fact that he's just a pretty skilled dude, what's the general attraction for rugby union to bring in a rugby league player? Is it because of the defence pattern that rugby league sort of builds?
No, I think athletically, they're not dissimilar games. If you can teach someone the basics of the ruck, and you can, and a lot of these guys, like I dare say Joe Marnie might have played it as a kid, so a lot of guys and girls this day and age are playing both as a young.
Angus Crichton, for example.
Yeah, exactly. He's probably, the difficult thing with Angus is he was a back row or a centre in Union, so when he's sort of looked at coming back to rugby, no one really knows what he is, and that's.
He's big too.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's got bigger.
Very big.
Yeah. So
thick set.
I think they're professional. They're the best athletes. Some of them are the best athletes in the world. And I think you can look at who they are as their character as people, and if they're a good league player and they've got a desire to learn rugby, it'll work out for them, and vice versa. Good, not necessarily too many big tight forwards because of the body shape, but almost anyone from number 6 through to 15 in rugby could turn out to be a decent league player.
Is that because when you say 6 to 15, you're talking about
back rowers or
back rowers? Yeah. But one of the things I notice about rugby union, they're big.
Yeah,
especially in the front row is shorter and wider.
Yeah,
probably don't have the legs.
No, they wouldn't be able to do the up back.
Don't have legs. But the guys behind them, they're not only tall, but they're big.
Yeah,
they're bigger.
A lock's 120 kilos.
Much bigger.
6'8". That's the sort of standard world size lock. He's 6'8", 120.
How do those individuals convert into rugby league then?
No, they wouldn't. There's very few examples of those. There's more examples of those guys being unsuccessful over the years, just because the up and back nature of the onside up and back and 10. And admittedly, the big front rowers in rugby, they could trim down, but typically speaking, that's why rugby is such a unique game. Because
totally
there is a sport within a sport, scrummaging, and I appreciate scrummaging way more now as a coach because I was in scrums, I was at the back, I didn't do as much as others did, but you learn the importance. You can win and lose a game on a good or bad scrum in the modern day of rugby. And so I do love the contest that rugby provides there. But in terms of athletic ability, those guys, it would be too big a leap for them to go from rugby union to rugby league. Yeah.
And do you think therefore, is that part of the downfall of rugby union? I mean, in terms of a spectator sport, let's just talk about Australia obviously because other parts of the world maybe not the case. But in rugby league, everyone's pretty much the same. What I mean by that, apart from your halfback and maybe your fullback, but generally speaking, your outside backs and most of your forwards, except maybe the hooker, dummy half, they're all about the same size. They're all about 100 plus kilos. They all can run 12 seconds, 100 metres. They're all big and strong and robust, and it's become a bit of a same game, and it's very fast and it flows and it doesn't. And because by the way, this is what the physiques of the rugby league players can do. They can just keep rolling, keep rolling. It's a good spectator game. Rugby union still is very pure. Your front three, they're all 120 kilos, but they're all 5'8", 5'9".
Yeah.
And then your back rowers, your tall guys, and then your back line is similar sort of players what they were when they were playing schoolboys. They're all good runners. They can run with the ball, and they can kick the ball, and then catch the ball. So do you think rugby union has stayed too pure?
I think it's a harder game for the audience to understand. That's probably the big challenge in rugby at the moment. Just to sit there and watch it. No one likes to watch sport and not understand it. That's
so more technical.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of rules.
What was that penalty for?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Sometimes you don't know.
Sometimes the end, you're sitting in a game of rugby. I was at World Cup. What's that penalty for? And you're like, it could be for a number of things. And you'll argue. You sit there with mates that you'll view some people as really good rugby analysts, experts, and you'll argue over penalties, And I suppose that still happens in rugby league with put downs and was his foot in or out, but it's not.
It's not more a technical. It's not an easy thing. He fucked it up. He made a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in rugby, it's not that easy. The biggest issue with rugby is it's probably the hardest sport in the world to referee. No sport in the world can a game be influenced by the referee. And again, I go back to the USA model. In an NFL game, there's eight umpires. They're all responsible for something. Rugby league have tried 2 referees and they've gone back and said, we don't want that. Rugby hasn't. I know apparently they've tried it in some competitions. I think we've got to start trying those sort of things. You know, it's that hard a game. We always know. So as a coach, one of the first things I do, I look at the referee before I look at the opposition on a Saturday.
Because you've studied that referee.
Well, you just know what they've got key interpretations that they're a little bit stricter on. Some are more stricter on offside. Some are a bit more stricter with going off your feet of the ruck. Some are strict on coming and clean out from the side. So that in itself, like the referees are not doing that. They're not doing anything wrong. It's a hard game for them to manage. I can't think of a game in the world that's harder to referee than rugby.
And therefore makes it a lot more difficult as a spectator game.
That's right.
And you rely on your spectators in terms of money and TV rights, and because TV companies don't give a shit as long as they've got people watching it.
That's right.
I'll pay you a lot of money if you can give me a lot of content, and that content wants to be watched.
Yeah.
And people will stop watching it if they don't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, I go back to much simpler days when we used to watch it was, the Campese and all that sort of people.
Yeah.
Much simpler game.
It was.
And it was easy to watch for me.
And it's become it's a challenging game to adjudicate, and you're on your own out there, and you've got there's so many. You've got linesmen, or they're called ARs now, assistant referees, and they're responsible for offside. But at any given ruck, you pulled up 5 clips now, and you showed me a penalty. I could agree or disagree, and I could find 1 or 2 other infringements at that same ruck. And so it's a bit like, well, what was the most cynical penalty there? What one affected the outcome of the game? What deserved to be blown? Like sometimes referees will have excellent games to a spectator, and they'll be hauled in from their coaches and go, you let all these things go. That was...
So what's the answer to that? But who is making all this technical rules?
Oh, look, this is the problem with rugby is that it's, if the NRL want to change a rule, what do? They go to Moore Park and they change it.
Yeah.
It's changed within they can change rules in a week.
Yeah.
Rugby have to go through like a bylaw, they have to go through a trial period.
Oh, really?
So we're now, Sydney club, all club rugby playing a tackle or below the sternum. Any tackle above the sternum is a penalty. So I'll have players that play for the Waratahs on a Friday night that tackle normally and then come down and play on a Saturday.
So club rugby is different to rep rugby?
This year it is.
In terms of the
tackle height.
Yeah. So
anything above the sternum is a penalty.
Yeah, so because they're trying to protect the head.
Yeah, but then there's a flip side of it. The taller guys that we just mentioned, the 6'8", they've got to now bend their back a little bit more. They're the ones a little bit more vulnerable, getting knees to the head because they've got to become legs tacklers all of a sudden. So it's not easy. And so this is just one example of how the game, and for this to be approved, it needs to go through a trial period, World Rugby, and every time Australians understand it, like Australia, New Zealand, we want the game to flow because that's what we compete against. And every time something goes to get changed, the Northern Hemisphere, who prefer a different style of rugby, and if there's a board of 10 and there's 6 from the Northern Hemisphere, where do the 6 vote? So there's always this pushback.
So it's more an international rule.
You need to change the laws. They need for it to be sanctioned by World Rugby.
Oh, right.
So there's the problem, just there. You're never going to, because the Northern Hemisphere, everything that we don't like, kick to the corner and there's a maul, Australians will go to the bathroom during that. They'll go get a beer. Whereas the North, they start cheering when there's a maul, a scrum or a maul 5 metres out. Because it's just, the conditions over the years, the weather, the style of footy that have been successful as a nation, it's different to our style of footy.
Do you think, you just mentioned that the tackle height, which I'm on the NRL's concussion committee, which is part of the player safety group. So it's a subcommittee part of that. And we often talk about the ARU rules or the Rugby Union rules relative to tackle heights and stuff like that. And at this stage, we have not brought a rule in like you guys have brought that rule in. Has Rugby Union become an anti-state? Ex-player?
No, I look at... I do think I reckon there's going to be some issues in league and...
Don't want to get hit in the head, I get that.
No, I think there's going to be...
But why sternum below?
No, I don't necessarily agree with the sternum below because of the height of some players. I don't agree with that. I do agree with how rugby are managing protocol for head knocks.
Well, we're doing the same now. So we've got the same, 11 days, 10 days.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But if I
So when the shoulder charge got taken out of rugby league,
Yeah.
I thought this is terrible. Like this was some of the best highlights. But now you think about it,
no, it had to happen.
yeah, because it was an unfair advantage for someone to be able to load up, not have any technique involved, and knock the lights out of someone else.
Or someone like Dylan Apper's 6'8" or something
That's
like that,
right.
and he's 120 kilos.
You're still seeing really tough players make really good hits in rugby league without shoulder charging. So I think we learn to evolve as spectators. There are definitely parts of the game where.
But do you think above the sternum below the sternum, I should say, is going too far? Like,
there's a.
I mean, like if you hit around the top of the chest, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, look, it's everything I coached last year had to be thrown out the window at the start of this year, and we had a good year last year. We won the comp on the back of defence, and it had to be changed when an email came around in middle of January this year. So there's. I'm sort of the opinion. I'm happy to, a bit like when I'm saying I think we should try things like 2 or 3 referees. I'm happy to try things like that to see if it works. But there are parts of me there's a lot of things like the contact in the air where there's the red card. A lot of things have been tried in rugby where they're bringing the 20-minute red card where you get a yellow card and then they go and get time to assess if it gets upgraded to red. So I think World Rugby.
I quite like when they get. Is that the one where if you get sent off, you get a red card?
Yeah. Someone else can come back on.
In 20 minutes, someone else can come back on.
Yeah.
I quite like that.
That would have been awesome in Origin
the other night. Origin. I mean, I saw them.
So there are some things they're doing. They're doing some.
That's
good
a
stuff
good
here.
rule.
Yeah.
But a good example. And I'm not excusing what Joseph Sua'ali'i did, but that Joseph's 6'6" or something, and Reece Walsh is like much smaller, and Reece slipped because of Joseph's height. And may well be there was some recklessness in there, but he didn't adjust, and but very hard to adjust mid-flight.
Okay.
And I would have thought in rugby, everyone's 6. There's a whole lot of guys that tall.
Yeah.
But there's also guys much shorter. So I would have thought to myself that would be a real danger, not being able to tackle above the sternum.
It's really difficult for a lot of guys.
I mean, the sternum, I guess,
it's there. That's what it is.
But how does the referee see that?
Yeah, and it's not fair to the referees because these guys, they're now got to go and police something completely different. So whether it'll be, the thing is, when World Rugby started, there's a few nations did it before us. Everyone's sort of trying to be politically correct. So I don't disagree with why they did it. I don't think it's made it any better or worse at the moment. It's going to take years to work that out. But
is there an existential threat to rugby union with the rules? All the new rules that are coming in, everything just keeps flowing in the joint. Will it last?
It'll last globally. The fear is that we don't get it right and we become a sport that that isn't in the sort of realm of one of the big sports, and we just can't fight our way out to get back in the top 3 in the world like we sat there for 15 years. That's the threat. The global threat is not there. I love my league. I get disappointed with the league, the perception of league to union, and I'm an Aussie kid. I love watching my league. I don't reckon too many league boys sit there and are proud to say that they like watching rugby. I reckon it's a little bit of it's a badge of honour to say, oh, rugby sucks. And the game is really unhealthy to pro level. Globally, there wasn't a spare seat at the World Cup, you know what I mean? The game is really healthy. We've just got to be performing well. And the Wallabies, sounds silly, there's a lot to fix to make the Wallabies successful. But if the Wallabies are successful, it'll be a popular sport in Australia.
Is Phil Waugh the right guy?
I think he is, because you saw him play, he's a pretty tenacious sort of fella. He's going to have to make some enemies like he did on the footy field. He's got to be prepared to be unpopular. But I think the current chairman is Daniel Herbert and Phil Waugh. You just got to we've got to stick with them. We've had so much turnover. Disappointed with how the last administration went down, that whole playing the stuff in the media and taking pot shots at league and trying to play the intelligence card.
Not smart.
We didn't, it's still hurting us now. You don't poke the bear, and you sort of show respect to where league are, and Volandis is doing a fantastic job. And I think we became, that is probably half the reason why a lot of league fans hate rugby at the moment, because how our former chairman was out there disrespecting the intelligence of another code. I just thought that was poor taste, and rugby's never been about that.
I want to do a complete switch now about you, Stevie Hoiles. You co-founded a business called Recoverie.
Yeah.
Outside of rugby league. Well, it's sort of like a rugby union, rugby league. It's nothing to do with what you do day to day, I guess, but it is something you do day to day. What's Recoverie?
Yeah, it's a wellness centre that has group and large size ice bar, saunas, hyperbaric chamber, compression boots. It's basically what we've all seen for years that was accessible at SFS Footy Stadium, the shared hot tub and the sauna. And I just retired I've had a couple of gym franchises. Been involved in Anytime Fitness and then F45. I'm about to open a Strong Pilates, a Pilates wellness centre.
The Strong brand.
Yeah, going to open that soon in Coogee. And I just, over time, when I went through retiring and body was broken and wasn't able to access a lot of the services that I was getting as a full-time footy player, found it difficult to actually go and find these places. Just watched the emergence of saunas popping up here and there, some cryo machines, and we didn't have cryo machines. And I always knew that ice baths worked. And we just.
So what do you got? How many sites you got?
We've got Coogee, Cronulla, and Manly.
Okay, 3 sites in New South Wales.
Yeah, we've got a lease signed in LA.
So what's the site got inside? So I walk in, what do I get? Is it membership? How does it work?
It's both. It's membership. It's casual walking off the street, or it's multi-packs like Pilates and yoga model. You buy membership, you can come 2-3 times a week. You can come unlimited. There's different type of memberships. Half of our revenue comes from memberships, and half comes from walk-ins off the street or multi-packs, which is good because they're all paying different prices, and members will be able to come as many times they want throughout the week, or you might not want to come. It might be something you only do 4 times a month. So you just buy a multi-pack, or you pay once as you're coming off the street. It's honestly very much similar to what you would have seen at the Allianz or the Sydney Footy Stadium spa back in the 80s.
So you got an ice bath?
Got a large ice bath that can fit. Put it this way, we can get a rugby team in and out in 45 minutes. So you've got 3 or 4 saunas, you've got 2 or 3 ice baths. One might be 3, 5, 10 degrees. You've got a big hot bath that could be 40 degrees. And then you've got a room outside that's got 12 recliner chairs with compression boots, and we've got a lease signed in the States, and there's sort of the IV therapy, the longevity side.
Like the drip?
Yeah, the drip. There's all that sort of stuff that is starting to become a little bit more mainstream now.
That's not in Australia though. That's
no, we've done it in Australia. Yeah, we've tried it, and we've sort of taken some data on it.
So you can get vitamin C and B12 shots, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and it's becoming a little bit more popular here, but still over in the States, it's pretty common everywhere.
I stayed because Caesar's Palace, and I was walking to the gym.
Yeah.
There is a centre right there. You can go and get. There's about 30 different infusions you can get.
Yeah.
Like every vitamin in the world, things I've never even heard of, and you could just, I didn't go in, but I was tempted to, but it was just everything was set out there. It was pretty amazing, but there was people in there. I saw people in there. So recovery is it's not just recovering; it's just for health and wellness, I guess. At the end of the day,
and so what we sort of thought initially, we probably thought it'd be like the gym junkie or the weekend warrior. We've now been a big day on a Saturday or Sunday is like a couple hundred guests, a couple hundred people come through the door. And I would say 30% of those people are there, not because they've got an injury, just because they want to stay on top of their mental health. So Monday mornings, just to start their routine, just to go and sit in an ice bath for 10 minutes in a 30-minute booking. You go. Everyone's got their own routine. We don't tell people what the right time is. It's up to the individual to work.
They've got to book in though.
They've got to book in.
Yeah.
And there's private bookings where you can get your own room and you get your own sauna and your own plunge pool, or you could be sitting in there tomorrow and you could be sitting there with. A famous Swans player could be sitting in there, and you might love that, but your partner might not like that. So there's private facilities and there's shared facilities. Yeah,
so but it's ice bath, infrared, we're talking infrared,
or traditional sauna, steam room, infrared. We've got all of them.
And you've got the boots.
You've got normal compression boots.
And you've got a
hyperbaric chamber. And
we've
got a dry float bed. So those float pods that people use. We've got a dry version of that, which is a hot water bed.
And let's just put the infusions aside, but that could be for the future. But are there other professional aspects to it? Like, for example, you can do consultations with someone about my blood count.
So in the States, that'll be the longevity side of it. We're opening our first one later this year in Los Angeles. I was living there for a couple of years, and I sort of noticed when I was there, I was coaching a rugby team. I couldn't find a large size ice bath in the whole of Los Angeles.
Really?
Unless you got to Lakers facility or
UCLA,
and it was impossible. So we spent 4 hours trying to get a rugby team through the day before a grand final. And there's a few competitors over there, but they're more the private suites, like day spa, small sauna, small one-person plunge, and they can fit 3 people at a time. And they might have a room that has 3 or 4 of those. Whereas you walk into ours and it can fit the same number of people that have just left a group training class of 30 people. So large people in a short period of time, therefore you can charge them a little bit less of what the competitors
So
are
is it
charging.
sort of like the Gary Brecker thing? Like he's just a bit more full on in that he does a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah. So that'll be a big part of what the first one in Los Angeles. There's a medical director who's involved in the business now, and he will trade his medical concierge business outside of our first one in the States. And that'll be part of our membership will be you get a consultation with the doctor, you get your bloods taken. So that's purely in America because they're probably a little bit more.
Can you do that here?
You can do it here, but it's a whole different. We haven't got a medical director as part of our head co here, so we're sort of working through that. But you need a licensed doctor, and then you need a registered nurse to go through all of those things. So we haven't hit go on that in Australia yet because we've enjoyed the success that Coogee, Cronulla, and Manly have had. We've got more sites coming and potential more in the North America region, and it's been exciting. Yeah,
you're going to talk to Timmy again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't talk to him about that.
Could you go and talk to Timmy again? No, Timmy, you're probably listening, so I'm just mucking around, mate. It's all good. Can you just explain though how ex-rugby union player, current rugby union coach, how do you get involved in something like recovery? What's the story?
How did I?
Yeah, what's the story behind that?
Well, I had other gym. So I missed 3.5 years with an Achilles injury at like the age of 28, 2 kids at the time. It was like a tough period, but I sort of knew this rugby thing won't last forever. And I also knew what I was like at school. I wasn't a good student. Sport kept me, it got me into a lot of detentions, but sport was sort of what really kept me on track at school. And I just knew I'd never be a good 9-to-5 person. I just wouldn't thrive in that environment. So I invested and opened my first gym. It was a 24-hour gym while I was in Canberra. I was playing the Brumbies. I was an injured player. I did that. Got out of that one. I was down the South Coast. Then I got out of that brand and went to F45. I just sort of started to see the high number of people that were taking up gym memberships. And then all you kept hearing, talking to good friends at physios and chiros, was the high number of people that were gym membership. And then 2-3 months later, were booking themselves in for regular physio or chiro. So this self-maintenance part of what we learned to do as a rugby player, that's what you get good at. You get good at being able to push yourself, but then work how to get yourself back into shape as quickly as possible. I just realised that there is a market here for people that are now starting to be really conscious of not how they look, but how they feel. And then COVID came like 2 months after we opened Coogee, and we're right next door to a gym, F45 and Recoverie next to each other, and we own both of them. And the numbers were pretty even for membership and whatnot pre-COVID. Post-COVID, wellness just went through the roof. People just started to become so concerned and aware of how they were feeling and what they needed to do to feel better physically, that it became part of their routine. And we're sort of seeing that now, like the amount of education and what you can learn about what is good for your physical health becomes good for your mental health and vice versa. And we're an aging population, you know. Have you ice bath before?
Yeah, heaps.
But
I've got one.
30 years ago, maybe?
Nah, never. I did when I was playing footy. But generally speaking, no. You had to go to a particular facility to have an ice bath.
And so you just see now this emergence of people that now know that this isn't something that they have to do if they've got a sore back or a sore hamstring. This is something they want to do to avoid getting a sore back or a sore hamstring, or just to feel good and clear and good mental clarity. Do
you remember... I tell you a funny story. I don't know if you remember this guy, but maybe you do. When you were a young bloke, I was best mates. He's now passed away, but a guy called Gary Stanwell, Mitchell Stanwell.
I know Gary Stanwell really well. Mitchell's one of my good mates.
I know Gary was my best mate.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we boxed together.
So I knew he was a great boxer, wasn't he?
Well, Gary introduced me to boxing when I was 9.
Gary?
No, in the Army.
Yeah.
He went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was in the military police.
Yeah,
he was
family, great family.
He was a good boxer. And so when he introduced me to boxing, and then like when I was 18, 19, anyway, we trained together till I was 40. And every morning we'd meet down at Bronny's Surf Club, and we'd 3 days a week. We'd Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. Every year, never stopped. We were in the surf club, and we'd go for a run from Bronny to Bondi and back. And then we go and hit the bag and all the old school stuff, you know. And then, but the thing that we always did was we always jump in the water, summer, winter.
Yeah.
And that winter swim, I think, was like having an ice bath.
Yeah.
Not quite as cold.
It's still 12, 13, 14 degrees. It's still down there, yeah.
And I reckon we never got sick.
Yeah.
Neither one of us. In the end, he ended up getting cancer, unfortunately. But neither one of us ever got sick during that period. And I had 4 kids. You know, I was running a big business. And I think about it today, people get sick a lot, and I never got sick. And I always put it down to the fact that I was jumping in the cold water 3 times a week, summer and winter. We never missed. And in fact, I remember taking my oldest son, and Mitchell, and Gary and I said to the 2 boys, you guys got to come for a run with us. And they were about 11 or 12. And we were running from Bronte to Bondi. And there's a few pretty steep hills. And I never forget, Mitchell and Dane both started crying. And we left them behind. We ran on, and we said, well, you guys can sit in, we'll get us when we come back. But that cold water stuff, I think, actually helped me avoid injury and illness.
Yeah.
And I think today...
That's the big thing. It's not about fixing you if you're broken. It's stopping you from getting to the point where you can't train.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the biggest benefit for myself. I know I'm not going to be as big, fit or fast, as strong as I once was, but if I can stay injury free, then I can still go I don't run at all anymore, but I can still train. I can still go to the park with the kids and be active at footy training, things like that. So it's not about just trying to get myself to peak performance. It's about being able to continually train and exercise, because I know it helps me physically. It helps me be better with work, better with family. Mentally too, I think. Absolutely.
The cold water is good for the mental thing. I don't know what it does physically. And it's funny you should say, because I was only talking to an orthopaedic guy this morning before I came here, and he was explaining to me that if you look at the data of all Australian males over time in terms of our age, he said your muscle amount
wastage
of muscle volume, wastage or
Yeah.
volume goes down on a very quite a smooth line over time as you get older. It sort of reaches down in. One day you're dead and you've got very little muscle mass left. You're 100 and you've very little muscle mass. He said, but if you look at individual people, he said it's not that smooth. It goes like this and it drops. It goes like this and drops over time.
Yeah.
And he said, what you got to try and avoid is that drop period. And he said, one of the most important things to avoid that drop period is that you don't get injured.
Yeah,
because you can't train.
Yeah.
He said, so what happens is over a 2 or 3 week period, if you've got an injury caused because you're not well enough, you don't train, you'll lose muscle mass, you'll never recover it.
You never get it back.
You don't get it back.
Yeah, so you want to be on like a life maintenance program, hey?
Cold helps you do that.
Yeah.
Cold and hot therapy, by the way.
Contrast therapy.
Contrast therapy.
We've got options to be cold bath, hot bath, or cold bath sauna. You get the option to choose both.
So that's what your recovery's doing.
Yes, contrast therapy,
It's interesting because, it's probably scientifically proven that this is the sort of stuff we should be doing in order to, because most people don't get in their head, why would I bother having a cold, going in a freezing cold bath? Why would I bother getting into a really hot sauna? Why would I bother doing it regularly? Why would I bother? Because at the end of the day, it's about maintaining muscle mass. For a bloke anyway, I guess same applies to women, but muscle mass for a guy. It's very hard to maintain muscle mass if we go through periods of illness or injury. Yeah. And what you do is work out, how do I avoid illness and injury, or how can I actually give myself a fighting chance? And I think some of the recovery is pretty smart. It's sort of tapping in to the modern or the science around modern thinking in terms of maintaining being your best possible self for as long as possible.
There's also I saw the Huberman. Andrew Huberman came to Australia at the start of the year. Yeah, he actually came into recovery throughout the course of the week. And I watched his seminar at the Sydney Opera House, and he said one thing that was really, I've always thought this, but how he said it, and I can't say it in technical terms.
Paraphrase it.
But he said that something along the lines of, for everything you do that you don't want to do, like if you don't want to go walk down the shop and buy food in the morning because it's too cold, if you don't want to go to work, every time you do something that you don't want to do, you build in like a mental resilience, but there is a physiological improvement in your brain of you being able to complete tasks you don't want to do. Like, and you think about
going to cold water.
Yeah, but not doing things physically, but just if you don't want to go to work today, if you don't want to stay back for another hour because it's easier not to. Everything you do that you don't want to do, and you push through some type of resilience barrier, there is a physical improvement. There is a physical change in your brain doing things or completing tasks that you don't actually want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because. And I have to finish off on this, Stevie, but what's interesting about what you just said is that I think, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I reckon one of the reasons we age after a certain point, like your dad would be around my age, is that we sort of get comfortable and we don't have to do things we don't want to do. We don't need to do this anymore.
You don't need to go out 4 times a week and stay at home.
I don't need to. And I think what that does, what we should be doing as we get older, is to actually force ourselves to do the things you're talking about in order to keep challenging ourselves. And I think it's really important. And it's a simple thing. Jumping in an ice bath is a simple thing.
Yeah.
Like if they go to your joint, your recovery place, you just pay the fee, whatever it is, and by that stage you probably have accumulated a little bit of money anyway. You got the ability to live a certain lifestyle. If what Andrew Huberman says is correct, and what you just try to paraphrase, if it's correct, then actually we will live with more vitality going forward. Because if we just, we've got the house is paid off, we've got 1 or 2 investments, I've got my super, I'm cool, I don't have to do anything, I don't need to train like I used to train, I can't train like I used to train because my knees are no good.
You find another way instead of stopping.
So I've got to get challenged. Yeah. And dudes my age start thinking about finding the challenge. And it's a pretty simple one, just jumping in a cold bath.
Yeah.
It's pretty bloody simple actually.
Yeah. As
a regular thing. Make it part of your routine.
And the sheer fact that you talk about this and people are now this has become very normal in people's lives.
Yeah.
It's not unusual.
More for your age group though.
Yeah, and so in 20 years' time, every 60-year-old, not every 60-year-old, but a large number of 60-year-olds
you'll be doing it.
We'll be doing it.
Yeah, but my age group, we're not doing it.
No, not enough.
Because there's like a lot of us can't wait to retire.
Yeah.
Can't wait to get to 65 and hang the gloves up and stop doing everything.
And everything slows down once you slow down.
And then once you slow down everything, you start to lose muscle mass and things. You just start to deplete.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that you got business partners.
Yeah, I got Nick Bardetta and Trev Folsom, and so we've gone down that path of we're not a franchise, we're a partnership studio. We have studio partners. And now we're just, because of what we've learned.
What's that mean as a model? So
instead of selling a territory and just taking a check off someone them being responsible for it, we're in for, if you're in a studio as a partner, as a studio operator, we're in with you. And we've got majority ownership and we've got the ability to raise and exit when we want to. But we just felt franchising wasn't for us because these are harder to open. Like you're putting pools, you've got heavy pools going on slabs, you've got ventilation, you've got a lot more risk for an owner. It's not just taking a check and opening up a Pilates or a yoga studio.
A lot more capital involved.
And a lot more, like there's engineering, there's a lot more.
Got to be done properly.
That's right. And so there's compliance issues. And we've just been going, a lot of the competitors, there's a lot of, I'm sure you've got an ice bath.
Yeah.
It's probably perfect for you at home, using it once or twice a day. But if you put 20 people in that ice bath, it's not going to be clean, it's not going to be cold.
Yeah.
So we've gone down that path of, we've built our own chiller and we've built our own pool, and we haven't gone to market yet, but there'll be a distribution side of the business soon, helping other businesses, hotels, gyms, add small wellness to their facility. So what we've sort of learned over the 5 years is about the compliance side of the business, and you got to put the right you got to put the right type of products in to make sure they're clean and they're cold enough and there's no issues with customers and there's no insurance blowback. So it's a big market. People are buying a lot of stuff for at home, and what works at home doesn't work from a commercial aspect.
My one definitely wouldn't work in a commercial environment. My one's one of those, I can't remember, it's got the stainless steel on the inside and the timber on the outside. You probably know the name of it.
Yeah.
It's
Odin?
Odin, yeah. It cost me heaps.
They're really good. They're great.
But the order...
Yeah, 14 weeks?
More. I think it was like 5 months or something. Like I waited forever to get it, but I got it. And
well, they're just so popular now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I'm amazed at that.
So we've got one of those in one of our studios, and then as a result, we thought, well, we've got to open all these more studios. Why don't we just design our own? So we've just gone down that hole, the rabbit hole of how to get your own version. The piece to the puzzle on this is the chiller that keeps the big large pool cold. Yeah. And on a hot day in Sydney or Queensland, and you've got 20 people coming in every hour,
body heat.
Yeah, so finding, and we've just sort of realised we're better off working with a few people to build our own, and we've put it in ours now, and we're just about to launch them elsewhere.
Well, I'm actually glad we got to talk about it, as well as trying to solve the issues around rugby union today.
I think it's harder to solve rugby, to be honest.
Stevie Hoiles, good to see you, mate.
Thanks, Mark.